Okay, welcome back. I have 20 minutes to convince you that the future of telecommunication is in Asia, is in China. What struck me about the presentation till now is that we have been speaking mostly about Europe and the United States. And I've been going back and forth to China for the past 15 years, and obviously there has been a tremendous amount of change there. So all my presentation is really about trying to get you focused away from the US and Europe and to China or Asia. Also maybe to integrate a number of changes which I think are going to take place in the coming years. Basically, try to think about the world. You have your usual map with the US, Europe, and then Asia. Behind me you have what I call the Weltanschauung about economics. You have three major blocks. You have the US, you have Europe, and then you have Japan. The way I like to look at the world is actually this way. It's the same map, but drawn with putting weights about population. Okay, and what immediately strikes you is you have two major countries there. You have India and China. The other thing that strikes you are the various colors which actually give you whether a population is growing or basically phasing out. And Japan and Europe are phasing out populations. This obviously has tremendous implication, not only about demographics, but also about technology, how many people use it, what they use it for, where they use it. I have three basic messages. The first one is that it's the first time in world history that you have a technology that is more used in the developing world than in the developed world, and this is mobile technology. The second one is that you will see an increasing number of war for standards in telecommunication taking place in Asia. You all use the Betacam VHS problem, war for standards, GSM versus CDMA. China, Korea, and other countries are battling today to develop the technologies of tomorrow. This obviously has interesting implications in terms of business. And the last point is that mobile phones mean radically different things to different people. I'm going to elaborate on these various points. Okay. I'll start with a bit of an overview about communications in Asia. The graph there is really to show you that you have what we call technological leapfrog, where people start using less and less fixed phones, and they went from nothing to mobile phones. Today you have 2.5 billion users of mobile phones in the world. 59% are in developing countries. Mobile user base grew by 500 million in the past 12 months. 25% of this is in China and in India. And the last point, which is also extremely important, is that mobile phones is going to be the primary device to access the internet, because people don't have enough money to buy computers. People also might not know how to read or to write, hence the mobile phone can be quite useful. I'd also like to point out a few things about diversity in Asia. And one of the things is that you have tremendous variance about penetration rates. You have Myanmar with 1% of penetration rate. You have Hong Kong with 101% penetration rates. This means that people have more than one mobile phone per person. The second one is in terms of actually the amount of money which is being made from mobile telephony in Asia. Typically in the US, you have an average revenue per user of $40 US. In India, it's about $4 US. China Mobile, which I'll speak about in a while, is $11 US. Okay. Today, out of the five biggest mobile operators in the world, three of them are from Asia. The biggest one is China Mobile. Who has heard of China Mobile around here? Okay, 350 million customers. The second one is Vodafone. What is interesting is that for 5 or 6 years, China Mobile has been working together with Vodafone to think about the standards of the future. The third one is China Unicom. Most people haven't heard of China Unicom. In China, mobile telephony is actually a duopoly. You have two government-owned operators, but they have just a small user base, 150 million users. Quite impressive companies. Okay, now I'm going to spend a bit more time about China specifically. I actually like this I love Chinese propaganda posters. I think they tell a lot about what a country is going through. And if you remember in the 60s and the 70s in China, young people were actually holding in their hand the little red book. Okay? It was about Cultural Revolution. Today, most people are actually holding a cell phone in their hand. Does anybody know who this guy is on the picture? This is the first man to have ever made a mobile phone from the summit of the Everest, of Mount Everest. What is interesting there is that China Mobile decided to actually set up a mobile network at the Everest base camp. So you'll never think about actually setting up a network there, but there is a huge amount of demand because you have plenty of people going there. Most of them are supposed to actually have been using a satellite phone, which are much more expensive. So that's one interesting usage. So China Mobile, it's 5-6 million new customers per month. Okay? Basically, it's the size of the Swiss market. Every month you have 5-6 million new customers. What is interesting there is that out of the 6 million customers, 1 million are regular contracts, 5 million are prepaid customers. That might not tell you much. Actually, what is behind there is that not everybody can afford to have a contract. Some people try, they just get a prepaid contract to see if it works, and then they refill it from time to time. Basically, the reason it works this way is that the new customers, they don't come from the cities. The people in the cities are actually contract customers. It's the people in the countryside. And I'm going to expand a bit more about what is happening there. The other interesting thing is that China Telecom, which is a duopoly in the fixed line, they're not gaining any customers every month now. In December 2007, they actually lost 1.5 million customers. That's kind of interesting. The other thing is the actual usage of mobile phones. And you have estimates. In China, everything is about estimates. And obviously, you have lies, damn lies, and statistics. So, is it 80 million? Is it 100 million? I don't know. It's just, the idea is to have an idea of the size of the market. So they're actually logging onto the internet using their mobile phones, sending 33 billion text messages per month. Okay. Google, which is never far away from good business, just signed a partnership with China Mobile to make it the default search engine on the mobile phones. That's, again, access to 350 million customers. China Mobile is starting with location-based services. There was actually a very interesting thing that happened in Davos at the World Economic Forum 2 weeks ago. The CEO of China Mobile was really happy about, he was a bit boasting about saying, in China, we know exactly who you are and where you are. And we can actually, via location-based services, we can sell you services. And you had a US congressman in the room who suddenly got really worried about, what does this actually mean for privacy? An issue that obviously the Chinese citizens are going to be dealing with not so far down the line from what I think. Another interesting point I'd like to highlight here is that if you have 500 million customers, it means you have also 500 million phones. In terms of environment, and the previous speaker did mention it, there is something going on there. You have to recycle those phones. And Nokia and others benevolent companies said, okay, we have to be responsible citizens or corporate citizens. And what they did, they said, we're going to set dustbins on the outskirts of the biggest cities in China so we can actually recycle those phones. But they have a hard time doing this because actually the Chinese are much happier to trade their phones. So they're actually selling it down the line, and the bins are actually quite empty. Another very interesting phenomena, and it's called Xiaoling Tong, which means little smart. It's an old technology, okay, based on PHS, which was developed in Japan in the 90s. Everybody promised it would actually die. They have today 80 to 90 million users in the countryside. Basically, it's fixed mobile telephony. The idea is that you have very limited roaming. But it makes a lot of sense because in most countries in the world, in the developing world, people will never go away from a radius of 90 kilometers from where they were born or where they live. So, why need global roaming when all your life will be spent on the countryside? The point there is that in developing countries, you have some relatively obsolete technologies which can still bring a lot of money, okay? You also need, obviously, business models, and you need the government in certain cases to support those technologies. I'm going to quickly speak about the second issue, which is the standards. Today, a lot of interest, I would say, has been wasted on 3G. The Chinese were really into developing their own 3G standard, and they actually took a technology from Siemens, which Siemens had sort of discarded, and they say, okay, we are tired of giving royalties to Qualcomm and to the GSM consortium. We are going to develop our own standard. And so they went with this TD-SCDMA. The problem is that they're facing a number of problems. The first one is that the operators, China Mobile and China Unicom, they have a GSM network and a CDMA network. And what happens is that they don't want to have this government-imposed standard. They want to evolve with CDMA's 2000 WCDMA. Then the Chinese manufacturers who are dying, the ZTE and Huawei, who are dying to sell their handphones to the rest of the world, they want economies of scales. So they actually don't want this Chinese government-imposed standards. And for 5 or 6 years, I've been going back to China repeatedly, and everybody was making fun of TD-SCDMA, saying, it will never happen, it will never happen. Well, guess what? Until now, the government has refused to award 3G licenses because they actually want to make sure that this TD-SCDMA technology is ready and mature. So there are actually some doubts whether China will have 3G telephony before the Olympic Games, only because of what I would call techno-nationalism, which is a bit sad. What is interesting is that when you look at China, but also if you look at Korea, the state is never far away from technological development. There is a very strong state interventionism, so you also have to think about that. I'll skip this one. In the past 6 months, I've been sort of scoping what I thought would be innovative handsets, and I found 3 of them. One is the first feng shui mobile phone by Motorola, which actually sense if you're in a feng shui kind of place. This is typically something for a Chinese market. The second one is about mixing a cigarette holder with a mobile phone. And the third one is the first fake iPhone. Okay? The iPhone was actually in China before the official iPhone was there. This issue of intellectual property is something that comes back and back and back. So you have it in goods, bags, you have it in drugs. Actually, it's an issue, but you also have it for mobile phones. Okay. Then I looked, again, in the past few years, I looked a bit what I thought were kind of innovative usages of mobile telephony in China. And the first one I found interesting is called crowd shopping. It's kind of amazing. You have actually 3 companies who are doing that. The idea is that you sign up to a network, and then suddenly says, okay, we're going to go and buy, we're going to raid on a company, we all get together, we approach the vendor, and we try to negotiate a discount on the spot. So imagine 500 people showing up at a store and say, okay, we agree to buy 500 times one good, just make a special discount for us. I had never heard of that, obviously. The second one is a bit more subtle. It's this question, it's the first time I heard about colors in text messages. China has, let's see, the government of a small city in China has asked its expatriates, those who had been going and worked in various countries, to send positive text messages back home. And in China, they have actually a way of putting a color on the type of text messages you send. So you have the red kind of text message. They're all written in black, obviously, but it's just the semantic of the text messages. For warm messages, you have the yellow one, which has a sexual content. You have the blue one, which is a joke. And then you have the black one you don't want to hear about. The government is also never very far away from trying to make money from mobile telephony. And they're actually offering people to download tips of the Korean War. So even the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, is trying to benefit from mobile telephony in China. It's actually a propaganda poster from the PLA. Okay. Another phenomenon which I think was extremely interesting is something called Supergirl, which is, I think, the UK version of Pop Idol and Star Academy in France. In 2004, you had 400 people who actually watched Supergirl. What is actually interesting is that they were able to vote like you're able to do when you watch this kind of show. Well, voting in China is not something people do all the time. So here you can start to have a feeling of why suddenly a technology can start to embarrass a government or another. 800 million text messages sent during the third season. Okay, then the government came in and said, okay, guys, we have to stop doing this kind of show and having people vote and give their view. Okay, no, it's now until now I've tried to give you sort of the advanced kind of usage in China. Obviously, we should not forget about the mobile divide. You have really low penetration rates in the countryside, and the mobile telephony can actually allow to bridge a bit this divide. And you have, for example, the Bank of China is trying to think about doing business in the countryside, and they have two ways of doing it. Either they open branches, that's one way, and it's going to cost a lot of money, $2 billion, or they can have a mobile rural bank system, which is going to cost them between $40 and $60 million. Okay. At the same time, you have China Mobile, who's offering agricultural information services, which are extremely cheap. Okay, and they have, again, 25 million customers in 2007. And the information is quite cheap, 25 cents per month. So for me, actually, the future of mobile telephony is in the countryside. There are a number of I'm always asked, what is the difference between the way people use their phones in China or in the West? And I'm not a sociologist, so it's really a hard question. There are only a number of things I can give you. Is that, from what I understand, people in China don't like to wait for emails to come back. So instant messages actually rules. It's really about being there all the time, being connected. That's obviously in the cities. You also notice it in the conferences. Each time I'm in a conference in China, the phone rings. Well, here, when I have my phone ring in the middle of a conference, usually I blush, I turn it off. When I'm in China, the people actually start answering and they keep doing business as usual. So you have fundamentally different way of approaching privacy and the way you use mobile phones. And then you have also very interesting things, even in terms of how people move around the country. Today or these days, it's Chinese New Year. It's usually a massive amount of people go from one point back where they work, back to where they were born, and to visit their parents, their ancestors, etc. And today, first people started obviously paying back the visit, then they started making a fixed call. They went down to the community house and made the phone call, and now they're actually just sending SMSs. So that's a way of simplifying things. This one I'm going to quickly skip. The last point is still about the countryside, and I'm skipping out a bit of China to tell you about Bangladesh, and probably many of you have already heard about Grameenphone. The guy who's behind Grameenphone is Iqbal Kadir, and his idea was to actually apply microcredit to phones. For those who have been to China in the past, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, you had, for example, from one building, you had one phone at the basement, and you had one person in charge of connecting all the people in the building. The idea of Grameenphone is basically the same. It says you empower one person in a village who becomes, if you want, the mobile phone booth. These people usually are women. They take a loan from Grameen Bank, and then they start, selling this service to the people around. So it's a fascinating story. Iqbal Kadir has actually a brother whose name is Kamal, and he's also in the mobile phone business for development. And the idea is to connect people doing business via the mobile phone. It's called sellbazaar.com. And there the idea is that most people don't have access to market prices information. They don't have access to eBay, because in Bangladesh, electricity is scarce. Again, some people might not know how to read. And when you do business, knowing the price of the good you're selling is kind of important. You might, again, save some money from having not somebody in the middle taking a cut. So the idea really, and that of course also can apply to the Chinese countryside, is mobile phones making market information accessible to all and empowering rural households. I'm making here a small side parenthesis, a geopolitical one, which is that, to me, the future of China, as an economic development, really rests in the countryside. Reforming the cities, no problem. The real task of the Chinese government is try to raise the level of living of the people in the countryside, and that's what I think in the next 10 to 20 years is going to make or break the Chinese miracle. Okay, my key takeaways. If you remember, in 1994, there was a very famous report saying that half of the world had never made a phone call. Well, today we have actually more mobile phones in the developing world than in the developed one. This war of standards I mentioned, it's China, it's Korea, obviously Japan is used to that. You also have some countries saying, okay, why don't we leapfrog from 2G to 4G? So you're going to have some surprises. On the other side, I'm not saying that everything is going to happen in China. I mean, Qualcomm and the GSM consortiums are still, up there doing their business and developing technology. And the last point is about what I said at the beginning, is mobile communication mean different things to different people. So the last thing is two comments made by Wang Zhenzhou, which is the CEO of China Mobile, comments he actually made at Davos. The first one is about his bet is that everyone in China and everywhere will have at least one cell phone. If not, he or she will actually lack basic human functions. I think this is kind of, you have to think about what it means. And the second one is this thing about privacy, about one company who belongs to the government, who knows who you are and where you are. And this, I think, doesn't only apply to China, also applies here in the West. Thank you.